and our sales tax, in a strange turn of events, we predicted to be 10% lower in 2020 than it was in 2019 because of the pandemic. In fact, we rebudgeted accordingly. However, sales tax in 2020 through November is up 3.08%. So that's 3% is a good increase for any year, let alone a pandemic year. So we feel good about that. We do not have December's numbers from the state yet. We observed growth in monthly sales tax reports for 8 out of the 11 recorded months. The average weekly wage citywide is up 8.5% from last year to $878. Rapid City gross sales are up 9% in the last 12 months. Hotel occupancy, however, is down 12.7% in the last 12 months. And the homes on the market in Rapid City, there's 174 homes on the market, which is down 76% from this time last year. And so it means people are buying homes, but it also has other implications as well. The increased demand for housing, the rate of which we can construct housing will, along with other factors, result in higher costs of housing. The average home price listing on the market right now, $314,500. That is up 16.5% from 1 year ago. The city issued its second highest number of building permits in history, with the 5th highest in permit valuation. So our valuation of all the building permits in 2020 was $272,250,000. And that is down more than $250,000 from what we would have been expecting in a normal year. We've been pretty consistently well over $300 million. Which makes sense. There were different projects being constructed in 2020. We did, however, have over 5,000 permits issued, and the total amount of fees for issuing those permits, almost $2.5 million. 44 of those permits had a valuation of over $1 million each. There were 715 new apartment units added, making it the highest year on record. And those apartment units are valued at $70,850,000. 241 permits issued for single-family homes. This is higher than normal. Typically, it'll run in the high 190s to the low 200s, 205 to 210. So we're at 241 for 2020. And the residential roofing permits, thanks to hail and other weather-related incidents here, 3,080 residential roofing permits, making it the highest year on record, totaling $32 million. And I know anybody watching this will remember just last month around Christmas, still hearing those roofing nailers in your neighborhoods. So under community development, a number of applications are being processed for review and approval of the Planning Commission. Some of those are 104 subdivision plat applications, which created 340 new residential lots and 30 new commercial or industrial lots. So that's a nice increase there. 3 tax increment districts were dissolved. Another way of saying that is 3 tax increment districts were paid off, returning over $51 million in valuation back to the tax rolls. That's how a TIF is supposed to work. The year-end 2019 Rapid City population estimate, 77,185. We're expecting the 2020 estimate to come in March of this year. So typically, we are increasing in population. The normal range is where we're at now, 0.85% up from 2018. Parking revenue is up. The two goals of the new parking plan were to create parking spaces in the downtown core and the central business district, and also to increase the revenue for better management and support of public parking. And those goals are being accomplished. So I believe we're going to see some parking management changes coming fairly soon. Currently, and this isn't a scientific analysis, this is my observation, currently our parking lot and area in Rapid City is being managed 1/5 by city finance, 1/5 by public works, and about 3/5 by the Rapid City Police Department. And that's a very clunky process, and it deserves better management because these are valuable public assets. So we will be using some of that parking funding to propose a new position in Rapid City for a parking manager. Within the Rapid City Police Department, a record year for homicide and other violent crime. The RCPD was awarded a $1 million community-based crime reduction grant to be used over 4 years to address violent crime and drug-related activity. Also awarded another grant to focus on employee well-being and to manage their various wellness programs within the RCPD. They'll be hiring a new wellness coordinator in February, and that will be really to take care of those police officers who we need so very much to protect our community. Unfortunately, in 2020, approximately 20 police officers left the Rapid City Police Department, either a few of those retirements, but many people just moving on. The workload, the environment, the pandemic-related issues have just caused a number of officers to move on, and that's a little more than double the expected number of openings in that department. So it puts a strain on those resources all the way around. They had several promotions in the police department this year, including appointing a new chief of police, Don Hedrick. Also, the police department and fire department were key in helping to set up the homeless COVID emergency shelter, which wasn't needed to the extent we believed it would be, but it was a great effort. As far as the Rushmore Plaza Civic Center, this will probably be the last press conference we have where we refer to it as a Rushmore Plaza Civic Center. July 1st of this year, it will officially become the monument. That's the entire campus. There was recently a naming contest held by Monument Health to name the new arena. And the votes were tabulated, and that will be called the Summit Arena. And just a reminder to everyone, the Monument Health has naming rights for the entire complex. That means the rooms, the hallways, the corridors, all of the space there as they see fit. And that's part of a sponsorship agreement that they have with the Civic Center. Construction on the new arena has been going well, despite some issues dealing with the pandemic and the shipping of supplies and materials. The mild winter weather has been a great benefit and has offset those inconveniences. And so construction is going well. It's on budget, it's on time, and expected to be complete by the end of September of this year. As far as the opening of the new arena, the Civic Center was the hardest hit of all city departments when it came to the pandemic, because they are a self-funded entity. They earn their revenue by renting space and forming partnerships with entertainers and other events. And those events were significantly, if not all but shut down in 2020 due to the pandemic. We're starting to see some more planning activity now, and there are some future bookings taking place. So it looks like that industry is going to come back alive here in this next year. So we're expecting a great year ahead with the new arena and all that that will bring for us. The Rush hockey team is going to play their entire season. They were delayed, so they are going to play, and it may go well into the summer months, which will be unusual. And then the Broadway productions are expected to return in this next season as well. For the Community Development Block Grant Program that the city administers, there were a number of funding awards that took place, and many of them this year were to low and moderate income housing projects, as well as public facilities and public service projects, which included $68,000 to provide rent and mortgage assistance. 233 individuals were assisted with accessing free pharmaceutical medications, and over 15,000 people benefited from the public facility improvements. As far as the pandemic-related Community Development Block Grant awards, the CARES Act provided the city with an additional $723,000 in CDBG funds to prevent, prepare for, and respond to the coronavirus pandemic. And so working through with a number of different agencies, the awards included $150,000 in mortgage and rent assistance programs through Pennington County Health and Human Services, and $100,000 in child care assistance programs through the United Way of the Black Hills. Switching gears again, code enforcement. 682 code violation cases were opened in 2020, and 554 of those came into compliance voluntarily. 128, however, had to be abated, and that really means that the government had to force them to come into compliance, either by assessing their property taxes or by sending them a bill, but those problems were all solved. It's just that 128 people had to be coerced into doing it. 3 vacant abandoned homes were boarded up, and 1 abandoned structure was demolished. So, the focus on 2020 was working with property owners to remove trash and debris, and I'm telling you all that more work is needed in this area. With the high winds that we have, and the fencing, and the open lots that we still have here, this town has really become a mess when it comes to garbage, and 99% of this garbage is on private property owned by someone who either lives here or lives somewhere but still maintains ownership. And so I think it's really up to us to try to get a little more pride back in our community. If you don't know who to call to get a piece of property cleaned up, you can always call the city and code enforcement and have them send a letter or start that process to get a cleanup going there. Also, don't be afraid to volunteer and to go out in the road ditches and other places that you see that are a mess and clean them up. Our town has while it's been ugly in some kind of social settings and political environments, it doesn't have to be ugly with trash that's blowing around. Changing then to the Rapid City Public Library. The drive-through service at the library served over 22,000 library users in 2020. That's up over 400% from 2019. At the drive-through, the public picked up library items, signed up for library cards, received prints, photos that they sent from home computers or their phones. Virtual library services were also offered via telephone, Zoom, text, and email. During the summer and fall, a pop-up mobile library offered material checkouts, librarian services, and Wi-Fi throughout the community. With education impacted by the pandemic, early literacy was even more of a priority. Virtual education events were developed to help meet the community need. Facebook and YouTube story times were provided, and the Dial a Story service was launched. These were accessed over 9,000 times during 2020 alone, exceeding the in-person story time attendance for all of 2019. Another early literacy initiative was 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten, designed to support our community's early literacy, school readiness, and child caregiver bond. Custom Black Hills themed wall charts were designed to track reading process and are offered in English and the Lakota languages. Education and upskilling for adults were also a priority. Access to online classes to build career and technology skills, as well as arts, language, and music were in demand, with nearly 3,000 online classes and tutorials accessed in 2020. The library is becoming the city's lead organization for its early childhood learning efforts. There will be more news on this as time goes on, but to learn more about early learning in our communities, that web page is earlylearnersd.org. Water reclamation. This is where your sewage goes, where all of your wastewater from your homes go. The sanitary sewer, the crews cleaned more than 255,000 feet of sewer lines and televised, put a camera on wheels through more than 118,000 feet of sewer. And there were 5 sanitary sewer overflows reported in the city. That's not bad. It's bad for those 5 people, but I have experience in those sewer backups, and they're not pleasant. Storm sewer. Crews cleaned more than 10 million square feet of drainage channels and ditches, along with 10 ponds, 335 inlets, and televised through 30,000 feet of storm sewer. Water reclamation treated more than 3.4 billion gallons of wastewater in 2020. Crews removed more than 347 tons of ammonia, nearly 3,000 tons of total suspended solids, and more than 2,800 tons of organics. As far as COVID-related issues at the wastewater treatment facility go, that was related to toilet paper shortages in 2020. Just when you'd almost forgot about the toilet paper shortage. So people began using wipes, paper towels, and other articles instead of toilet paper. And this caused blockages at the screenings for the equipment at the plant. In addition to that, non-COVID related, this group out at the wastewater treatment facility harvests about 100 pounds of flushable wipes at that plant every day. 100 pounds of wipes. And I'll just say this again. These flushable wipes you buy in the store are only flushable because they fit in the toilet. They do not biodegrade. And they cause significant problems for the sewer systems, can lead to blockages and backups, but if nothing else, are costing the taxpayers money for clawing these things out of the liquid sewage that comes into the plant, putting them in dumpsters, letting them drain, and then taking them to the landfill to dispose of. So my advice is don't use flushable wipes. If you do, put them in the garbage. The water division also produced 3.47 billion gallons of water. The peak usage day was August 23rd, when we used 20.9 million gallons of water, and the lowest usage day was April 8th, where it was 4.9 million gallons of water. The daily average usage is about 9.5 million gallons, and each of us, on average, in this community, use 121 gallons of water per day. Solid waste, that is the landfill and related services, processed 20 tons, 20,340 tons of yard waste for 2020. The landfill processed 3,000 tons of recyclables, and our region generated 170,000 tons of waste that was brought to the landfill. The streets division swept a total of 3,800 tons of material from the city's streets. In other words, about 457 dump truck loads of material, and roughly 300 tons of that taken from the city's streets by street sweepers is river rock. The rock that you have in your landscaping, that gets washed out into the street and doesn't get picked up. Now for the COVID update, we are likely days away from reducing our restrictions in city buildings, and we're basing this on active cases in the county, the rolling 7-day average, the positive test ratio, and examining what caused us to implement these strategies on October 23rd, and kind of working backward to get to this point where we've come to a level of comfort. When we go below 400 active cases in the community, we'll likely go to recommended status in city buildings for masks and other measures. Masks and isolation of work groups and meetings with outside customers and that sort of thing. So we're at 516 active cases in the county right now. So when we drop down to below 400, then we're going to relieve those restrictions a little bit, but we'll be prepared to reinstate them. We are planning to open the swimming pools this summer. It's not a promise, but it is. That's our intent. It appears that the trend in the COVID infections, coupled with the vaccinations, is positive for us. I still have faith that we can mess this up if we're not careful. We can start getting together and ignoring the pandemic, and we can drive those numbers right back up again. But vaccines are on the way. Several thousand individuals are being vaccinated now. There will be more as the months go on. And we'll be working with Monument Health to support their effort to vaccinate everyone. There's some good literature out there on the vaccines. There was an especially good piece that came from the South Dakota School of Mines epidemiologist group, and I think it was out in the media 2 days ago, regarding the safety of the vaccine and why you should feel okay about it. So now, that's kind of the specific update, and just some comments on our overall community health. How are we doing as a community? Well, I'm one person. I have an observation from how I interact with the community. I talk to a number of people who have their observations as well. But I think we are recovering rapidly from the pandemic-related effects. There are still some local businesses that are suffering from it, have not fully recovered yet, and our local businesses need your support. We are still somewhat divided on community issues, and specifically issues that have been politicized. Not every issue is a political issue unless you have a pandemic. And now we've got a lot of politicized issues out there, and we're very passionate about them. So there is a perceived benefit to arguing your opinion with friends and family, a perceived positive benefit that I don't think we're really seeing in reality. This is a protected, but I think a dangerous practice. Everyone does not have to believe what you believe, and you do not have to believe what others believe, unless it's that the earth is round. Then I say you should have to believe it. But there are a number of examples that I won't go into individually on how we have just laid down the battle lines and decided we're going to fight and die on these hills. And these come up so often, sometimes every city council meeting. They're up every day. There's some argument by local folks on social media every day over an issue that in the overall scheme of things may not be the highest priority. If we're to recover and become the community that we all want Rapid City to become, I think we're going to have to spend some time practicing. It'll take each one of you practicing patience and grace and forgiveness and investing deeper in your positive relationships. This seems like a very basic and a very elementary notion, that we would just try to be nicer to people and we'd try to let people have their own opinions and not be offended by everything that's said. That's the desire, that's the dream for us to heal and get on to a better community. I'm just asking you if you think we have what it takes. And if we do, I'd like it to start with you. Let it start with you today. And let you be a positive impact on someone else's life who's struggling with this anger and frustration from being cooped up and afraid for the last year. Okay? Thank you, and I would take any questions from people in the room. If you could go to the podium and give your question.
Which one? Oh, yeah, it's this one. So just like an overlook of 2020 as a whole, what do you think is going to be the biggest focus going into 2021?
Well, I think moving into 2021, we have to be constantly gauging whether or not we're ready to move forward in several areas. For example, with recreation or supporting team events and that type of thing. So from a pandemic perspective, you know, I hope and I think that we're going in the right direction and that things were going to be okay someday soon. But from a city, I think we have a number of things to address. We have a couple policy issues that keep coming out during city council meetings. I think we can do a better job on. I also think that we're going to have to be really prepared for the influx of people coming into our communities, both visitors and permanent residents. And then I'll tell you, with COVID money, with CARES Act money, and the money that was accumulated in 2020 by city staff, I think that we really need to take a look at one-time purchases, one-time expenses that will help provide better service, whether it's infrastructure or services. And we have that process to go through. We still have housing issues here. We're going to continue to have housing issues. Every time the average housing cost goes up by another $1, then the ability to have affordable housing goes down a little bit as well. So our efforts into that are going to have to be far more intentional and purposeful to get that done. But other than that, I hope to have it's pretty sad when you're hoping for a fairly normal year. So that's where we're at. That's what I think the priorities are right now.
Alrighty, just one more. You know, with you saying that some of the mandates maybe in the city might be lifted here in the coming weeks, even though, you know, some of the, like you said, even though some of those might be going away, you urge the community to stay safe and follow CDC guidelines, correct?
Well, absolutely. The restrictions that I talked about relaxing a little bit are for city facilities, not for the general public. We don't have a citywide mandate. But I would hate for the public to take it as a signal that we're in the all clear. I think that those statistics and that indication will come from the Department of Health and the CDC. So if you haven't had COVID yet, then good for you. Let's keep it that way. And I think the general public, everybody 16 and older, will be in line for vaccinations by by May. And so that's just really right around the corner considering all we've been through. Yeah, stay safe.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Hey, Mayor Allender, you and I have previously spoken about how 2020 really showed us how divisive people can be and how close, I think you said, how close hate is to the surface. Mm-hmm. Is that going to prevent the city from pursuing some actions or policies or ordinances or projects that would normally, in a normal, not as divisive year, happen, or no?
Well, that's a really good question. You know, the idealist in me says no. We should do what's right. We should move things forward as normal, and we should not let the example that we've created in 2020 dissuade us from doing what we know is right. However, the city council that sits here has really taken abuse this last year, and I feel badly for them. They have received personal threats. Many of them have installed security cameras at their homes. They are, some of them, constantly harassed, not just for trying to implement a policy, but sometimes for just voicing approval of a policy or concept. So there has been a real movement out there to intimidate public officials. So where the idealist says we should go forward with everything, I'm also a bit of a realist, and I think, you know, these individuals, these 10 individuals that serve on the city council, no one could blame them if they stopped and reconsidered whether they want to try to implement something that's out of the ordinary this year. There's a segment of the population that expects the government to sit here and wait for further instructions from the people. And I think I can't agree with that concept, because people like myself and the city council members were elected into office to do what's not normal, to do what's different from the status quo, to improve on our process and our services, to solve problems more efficiently. So there's a bit of a, you know, dilemma there. So I guess I've talked all this time without really answering your question, which can be also part of a politician's job. But, you know, I hope it doesn't. I hope it doesn't delay projects, ideas, initiatives that may come from the city council, because these individuals are put here to represent every single man, woman, and child out in this community. So, yeah, that's what I think.
Also, earlier you mentioned that some of the properties that may not comply with some of the code are due to property owners who may not live in the state or aren't reachable. Are there currently consequences for them, and will that be explored further? Thank you.
Okay, if I understand it correctly, the question was the 128 abatements that I spoke of where the government had to force someone into code compliance. Are there consequences to those property owners? Is that the question?
It's the consequences to the homes or properties where there are 3 homes boarded up, 1 torn down, and
right.
kind of, I think you refer to as garbage in.
Oh, yeah.
Those.
Yes, we are responsible for our private property. We're also responsible, because of a public code, to keep the trash off of it and to keep it from having junked vehicles and garbage or any hazardous materials, dying trees, that sort of thing. So in the short term, the consequence is the city tries to get you into compliance, and if you won't come into compliance, the city hires someone to come and do that job for them. So the price is typically inflated. And I'll give you a good example of that. Some of the problems we have is getting people to mow their lawn. So they'll get a lawn that's a foot tall and that the neighbors have been dealing with all summer, and someone's finally complained and they want action. So the city needs to hire a contractor. So we get a hold of a contractor who already has people on his schedule, and we ask him to bump up to the front of the line to inconvenience his other customers, come take care of this issue kind of on an emergent basis, and then therefore the price is higher. So where you might have your neighborhood kid mow your lawn for $10, when the city mows it, it's going to be $150 or more. Plus there'll be an administration fee on that, and it's just not worth it. Repeated violations, there can be a citation and a criminal code violation. We just don't like to go down that route because it doesn't seem to be more motivating than what we're doing right now. So this is more, code enforcement's more of an art than science. We work with people who are having troubles getting this old refrigerator or this old car off of their property. And then, so we treat public property differently than private property. For example, the police department takes care of everything in the public right-of-way as far as abandoned cars or things of that nature. So the long-term consequence can be accumulating so many of these bills that eventually you get a lien put on your property, or you get the property seized to pay the maintenance on it. And it happens very rarely, but it is a possibility.
At the start, Mayor, you talked about how now the city budget is up 3% with tax revenue, and you had estimated it was going to be down by 10%. As those numbers came in month by month, how relieving was it for you to see you're not going to have to pull the strings as tight on where budgeting was going to go and where areas were going to be cut?
Can I ask you to pull your mask down and ask me that question again?
So with the 3% coming up and estimated at the city's tax revenue was going to be down 10%, how relieving was it that you weren't going to have to pull the budget as tight as possible?
Well, it was surprising, and it was also a relief. Even early on when we saw, in mid-year, when we saw that our doom and gloom predictions were not coming true, we chose to keep the budget authority down 10% below what was originally approved, because who knows? So now that we're through 2020 and those books are being reconciled, that leaves us with some surplus cash that now we'll need to choose how to invest and what to do with it specifically. So very much a relief. I would say I'm cautiously optimistic going into 2021 that we're going to have a similar scenario there. And if anything good can come out of this pandemic, I think that it might be that, for one, people have learned how to interact with government differently. There's more people on the phone and over email, also online bill pay and all of those type of things. Our planning department, for example, I think has just done a bang-up job on servicing their customers, for the most part, remotely. And in fact, we're adding software now that will enable that even more. So maybe we can reduce some trips to City Hall to save people some time and to save staff time and to do that work more efficiently. So that's one of the benefits, perhaps, from the pandemic, and I hope that continues into the future. The other benefit is, I think many people who have not done so very much in the past, decided this last summer to get outdoors and to go up in the hills and to do something that's relatively free, right here at your doorstep. To take advantage, whether it's city parks and streams, lakes, or whether it's up in the hills or in neighboring communities, there's been a lot of regional travel and regional recreation due to this pandemic. And frankly, I hope that continues on to the future. I think it's fair to say many people have taken where we live and all that's available to us for granted. And I think hopefully there's been an awakening to those things, and we're going to see high numbers in those type of services again this summer.
And last one, you talked about possibly going from required to recommended for masks in city buildings. For city council meetings, will that also include getting rid of the limitations on people allowed within council chambers?
I think for the time being, we would keep the social distancing with the spaced out seating because it's still necessary to do that. We haven't got the all clear yet from the CDC or the State Department of Health. So we would be relaxing specifically the masks. Rather than a required mask, we would make it recommended. Secondly, we would make it recommended that work groups stay isolated rather than physically intermingling. And then also we would relax our soft prohibition on in-person meetings in city buildings. And so, but we would leave social distancing in place. Good question.
Hey, Mayor. So you kind of mentioned a little bit before how 20 officers either moved on or retired from the Rapid City Police Department. And with some of the really high crime rates, robberies, and homicides that we've seen, is that a concern going into 2021?
Well, yes, it's a concern, but not directly related to the reduced number of police officers. And it's a concern to the community because 2020 was the way it was, hoping for a better 2021. The ones who are really paying the price for those reductions in staff numbers are the remaining police officers who are working extra shifts and taking extra workload and risking being burned out. That is definitely a concern. So they're hiring staff over there, and all those processes are getting fired up and trying to keep that damage down to a minimum, but that's a devastating number of employees to lose in 1 year.
Yeah, absolutely. And then one logistical question I had was with the Rapid City Public Library. It's exciting that they had a big increase with their number of library users. Is that just through the drive-through that we've seen in 2019, or is that all like library users?
No, the numbers that I provided that were up 400%, that was just the drive-through.
That was it. Okay.
Some of the other services, like the story time and all of those type of things, are regular library services.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I have one more. You talked about the possibility of pools reopening this summer. How is that kind of working as using it as the carrot in front of the donkey, as if you continue to follow what we're doing and what's worked, we will be able to get back to somewhat normal for the summer and you'll enjoy these activities?
Well, I think that's the message, but frankly, I think people are tired of hearing the message, though. But if all things go well, we're planning on having a mostly normal year, especially as it relates to swimming pools. But if we jump the gun and mess this up, then of course we're going to have to reassess this on a weekly or monthly basis. And I'm just telling you what our intent is right now. And when it comes closer to that time, we'll make a decision for sure. Any further questions from the room? Well, thank you everyone for being here, and thank you, Katie.